being called a caretaker because everyone can see that he's lost control of his party. And this lot, they're all so busy trying to replace him. They can make as much noise as they like. We all know that this lot are so busy trying to...
Picture this. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom travels 6,000 miles to the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, hoping to be seen as a global statesman, a deal-maker, the man who finally thawed the ice age of British-Chinese relations. He sits down with Xi Jinping, talks about stability and closer dialogue, and comes home expecting a hero's welcome. Instead, he walks into a House of Commons that is about as welcoming as a rainstorm in January. He stands at the dispatch box, preening about diplomatic progress, only for Kemi Badenoch to stand up and reduce his entire 3-day mission to a single devastating 4-letter word: supine. It was a moment of pure political theater that left Sir Keir looking less like a world leader and more like a man who had just been tricked into buying a monorail. Quick favor, if you are loving this unfiltered look at the chaos in Westminster, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet, and honestly, seeing that number up is the only thing that keeps us sane in this volatile political climate. It is free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now, back to the show. So, let us look at the geopolitical realities Sir Keir Starmer keeps talking about. After 8 years of what he calls conservative inconsistency, our Prime Minister decided it was time for a reset. He took a delegation of 60 business and cultural leaders to Beijing in late January 2026, making him the first British Prime Minister to visit since 2018. His goal? To woo the world's second largest economy and convince them that Britain is open for business. He spoke of a broader, deeper, and more sophisticated relationship. He wanted to be clear-eyed while simultaneously shaking hands with a regime that has spent the last decade perfecting the art of the cyber attack. But while Sir Keir was busy discussing Shakespeare and football with President Xi, the optics back home were starting to smell. The Conservatives were quick to point out that this visit looked less like a strategic partnership and more like a begging bowl exercise. The Prime Minister argued that ignoring China for 8 years achieved nothing but Kemi Badenoch was ready with a reality check. She did not just attack the fact that he went, she attacked the way he went, describing his approach as supine and short-termist. In one word, supine, she painted a picture of a leader lying flat on his back, surrendering the moral high ground for the sake of a few meager trade concessions. The Beijing begging bowl was in full swing, and it seemed Sir Keir was more than happy to hold it. Now, if you want to know exactly what Sir Keir brought back from his grand trip, Kemi Badenoch had the answer ready. Apart from a few vague promises, she claimed he came home with next to nothing, except for, wait for it, a Labubu doll. Yes, you heard that correctly. For those not in the loop, Labubu is a viral designer toy made by the Chinese company Pop Mart. As part of the landmark deals, Pop Mart is pledged to open 7 stores in the UK. While Sir Keir was hailing this as a win for British business, Badenoch was in the comments hoping he'd checked it for bugs. It is a perfect analogy for the entire trip. While China is playing 4D chess with global infrastructure and security, the UK Prime Minister is celebrating the arrival of a plastic monster toy. Badenoch's sarcasm was punchy and effortless. She pointed out that while the Prime Minister looked like he enjoyed his dream-come-true trip, jabbing at his past as a man who was virtually a communist most of his life, the actual economic gains were, in her words, next to nothing. She basically told the House that Starmer had been played by a regime that knows exactly how to manipulate a desperate leader looking for a growth story. The Labubu doll diplomacy was the height of the absurdity, and the opposition benches were not letting him forget it.
Mr. Speaker, may I take this opportunity to solemnly commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women and children who were murdered. The Holocaust stands as a unique evil in human history. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister set his growth test. He said, if a policy is good for growth, the answer is yes. If it's not, the answer is no. This morning, the Chancellor embraced a series of Conservative policies. Although many are welcomed, they will take years to deliver. Mr. Speaker, when Conservatives left office, we had the fastest economic growth in the G7. But what is the government doing for growth now? It's destroying it.
The most suspenseful part of the exchange, however, was the debate over sanctions. Sir Keir tried to claim a glorious triumph by announcing that China had made it clear that restrictions on British parliamentarians, no longer apply. He presented this as an early indication of the progress made through leader-to-leader engagement. But Badenoch was not having a bar of it. She pointed out that these sanctions were originally placed on MPs because they had the gall to stand up against human rights abuses and Chinese spying. She argued that the lifting of sanctions was a cost-free gesture from Beijing, designed solely to trick the UK government into a false sense of security. They are giving him something that costs absolutely nothing. Why can't the British Prime Minister see that? She asked. It was a sharp, direct hit on Starmer's perceived naivety. She suggested that Beijing is simply using him to pave the way for a return visit from Xi Jinping, a move that would be a direct affront to the democracy of this place. The Commons erupted in laughter when Sir Keir claimed he had won an agreement for closer dialogue on cyber issues, a bit like agreeing to a dialogue on fire safety with an arsonist. While Sir Keir flaunted a cut in whiskey tariffs and a visa waiver for British tourists, the opposition described it as thin economic gruel. The halving of the whiskey tariff from 10% to 5% is estimated to be worth around £250 million over 5 years. Sounds good, right? Well, Badenoch pointed out that if the PM actually cared about the whiskey industry, he'd lower their taxes and energy bills here in the UK, rather than flying to Beijing to ask for a 5% discount. The underlying tension here is the geopolitical reality versus national security. Sir Keir claims we can protect ourselves while also finding ways to cooperate. But as Badenoch noted, China is currently planning to build a mega embassy in London, a project she describes as a spy hub, and a ransom Starmer had to pay just to get an invite to Beijing. The contrast between Starmer's sophisticated relationship and Badenoch's supine approach could not be clearer. One side sees a partner for growth, the other sees an autocratic giant that has tricked our government into a position of weakness. The economic gruel was being served, and Kemi Badenoch was not buying a single spoonful. The fallout from this trip has been fast-paced and brutal. Even with the visa-free travel for Britons, critics are asking why China is only offering what it already gives to 50 other countries. It is not a special favor, it is a standard move to boost their own tourism. Badenoch's supine remark has stuck because it captures the feeling that the UK is playing for small stakes, while China is playing for the world. Sir Keir hit back, accusing Badenoch of wanting to stick her head in the sand and calling her approach an abdication of responsibility. But the damage was done. By reducing his trip to a Labubu doll in a suitcase, Badenoch successfully framed the Prime Minister as a man out of his depth, wooing a regime that spies on us, while his own Chancellor Rachel Reeves wasn't even allowed to go. It was a masterclass in opposition, proving that, in the world of Westminster, one well-placed word can be more powerful than a 6,000-mile diplomatic mission.
Let's look at the employment bill. The government's own figures say it will cost business £5 billion a year. It clearly fails the Prime Minister's growth test. Will he drop it?
Mr. Speaker, I think the proposition they left a golden inheritance was tested on the 4th of July, which is why they're standing there. But she asked what we're doing. The ONS say we've got the highest investment for 19 years. PwC, second best place to invest in the world. IMF upgrading growth, predicted fastest growing major economy in Europe. Wages up, inflation down. Mr. Speaker, there's more to do. We're reforming planning and regulation, building the new homes that we need, supporting a third runway at Heathrow. And as she admitted to the CBI in November, there's no point me just complaining about Labour, she said. It's obvious that we Conservatives lost the confidence of business. We're not taking lectures from them.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about the employment bill because he doesn't know about it. Last week, he misled the House. He was not on top of his own education bill, listening to
But let us go deeper into this supine approach. To be supine is to be passive, failing to act or protest as a result of moral weakness or indolence. It is a heavy word to hurl in the Mother of Parliaments. Badenoch's argument is that Starmer has abandoned the integrated review, which labeled China as an epoch-defining challenge. Instead, he has pivoted to a policy of engagement at any cost. This isn't just a difference in diplomatic style, it is a fundamental disagreement on the nature of the Chinese state. Starmer sees a market, Badenoch sees a threat, he sees closer dialogue on cyber issues, she sees an invitation for more Trojan horses to be wheeled into Whitehall. The suspension of common sense, as the Tories see it, is the most dangerous part of this reset. And what about the business delegation? 60 leaders from across the UK accompanied the Prime Minister. They came from sectors as diverse as green energy, education, and Of course, Pop Mart toys. Sir Keir argued that these people represent the best of British and that their presence was vital to securing investment. But as Badenoch pointed out, many of these businesses are already operating in China and do not need a prime minister to hold their hand. What they do need is a government that protects their intellectual property and ensures they are not being used as pawns in a broader geopolitical game. By turning himself into a high-end salesman, Starmer has arguably diminished the office of the prime minister, making himself look like he is more concerned with Pop Mart's bottom line than the security of the British state. Let us talk about the cyber dialogue agreement. This was one of the few tangible outcomes Sir Keir could point to. But as many security experts have noted, China's definition of cooperation on cyber issues usually involves them asking for more access while providing none of their own. It is like inviting a pickpocket to help you design a more secure wallet. The laughter from the opposition benches when this was mentioned wasn't just political theater. It was a reflection of the sheer absurdity of the proposal. How can you have a dialogue on cybersecurity with a state that is regularly accused of state-sponsored hacking against your own parliamentary institutions? It is a level of naivety that borders on the professional. And then there is the visa waiver. China has announced that British citizens will now be able to visit for up to 15 days without a visa. Sir Keir presented this as a major win for the British public. But again, the reality is a bit more complicated. China is currently in the middle of a massive tourism drive as it tries to fix its post-pandemic economy. It has already granted similar waivers to citizens of France, Germany, Italy, and even Malaysia. This wasn't a concession won by Sir Keir's legendary charm. It was a standard economic move that Beijing would likely have made anyway. As Badenoch put it, the Prime Minister is celebrating getting the same deal as everyone else, while giving away our moral leverage. The mega embassy in Tower Hamlets is another flashpoint. The Chinese government has been trying to build a massive new embassy on the site of the old Royal Mint for years. The plan was blocked by local councillors over security and privacy concerns, but it is widely rumored that Sir Keir's government is preparing to override that decision as part of the reset. Badenoch described this as a spy hub in the heart of London, and she is not alone. Several former intelligence chiefs have warned that such a facility would provide unprecedented opportunities for electronic surveillance and physical spying on the capital's financial and political centers. By framing this as a ransom for a Beijing invite, Badenoch has hit a nerve. If the government does override the local council, it will look like a total surrender to Chinese demands. And we cannot forget the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Why wasn't she allowed to go? Rumor has it that Beijing specifically requested that she be left out of the delegation after she made comments about securonomics and the need to de-risk our supply chains from China. If the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is letting a foreign power dictate who he can and cannot take on a diplomatic mission, that is a serious blow to our national sovereignty. Badenoch's jab about the Chancellor being grounded was one of the sharpest lines of the day, highlighting the fact that while Starmer was playing the statesman, his own government was being dictated to by the Chinese Communist Party. The Labubu doll has become the symbol of this entire debacle. It represents the triviality of the gains made during the trip. Pop Mart is a massive company, yes, but is the opening of 7 toy stores really a geopolitical milestone? In a world where the UK is struggling with energy security, inflation, and a crumbling infrastructure, the Prime Minister's focus on designer toys feels like a short-termist distraction. Badenoch's use of the doll to mock the PM was effortlessly clever, turning what should have been a minor business announcement into a viral moment of ridicule. But Sir Keir is standing his ground. He argues that the world is changing and that the UK cannot afford to be an outlier. He points to the fact that almost every other G7 leader has visited Beijing in the last 18 months. He says that the integrated review was a product of a different era and that we need a more pragmatic approach. But pragmatism can quickly turn into appeasement if it isn't backed up by strength. And that is Badenoch's core point. By showing up to Beijing with a begging bowl and a supine approach, Starmer has signaled to Xi Jinping that the UK is ready to be bought.
Mr. Speaker, last week he claimed to have laid down an amendment that he had not made. He doesn't know what is going on in here or out there. Last week, I spoke to a woman running a business in Exeter. She is terrified of taking on new staff. She is struggling to keep her head above water, dreading what this government will do next. She's not alone. The Federation of Small Businesses says 92% of small employers are concerned about the employment bill. Clauses 1 through 6 make it harder for business to hire new employees, often young people looking for their first job. This isn't an employment bill, it's an unemployment bill. Given these clauses, will he drop his bill and show that he is not anti-growth?
The whiskey win is another example. A 5% cut in tariffs is always welcome, but it is hardly a landmark deal. The Scotch Whisky Association has been lobbying for this for decades, and while they are happy with the progress, they have been clear that it doesn't solve the broader issues of market access and intellectual property protection in China. By presenting this as a victory, Starmer is overselling a minor concession to cover for the lack of any real progress on the big issues like human rights, the South China Sea, or the crackdown in Hong Kong. And what about Hong Kong? Sir Keir claims he raised the issue of Jimmy Lai and the eroding freedoms in the former colony. But the response from Beijing was a familiar one: mind your own business. The Prime Minister's leader-to-leader engagement seems to have achieved exactly zero on this front. Badenoch pointed out that by engaging with Xi Jinping without any preconditions on human rights, Starmer has effectively abandoned the people of Hong Kong. He has chosen dialogue over dignity, and the result is a UK foreign policy that looks increasingly unmoored from its traditional values. The contrast in energy between the two leaders was palpable. Starmer, dry and defensive, leaning on his forensic preparation; Badenoch, sharp and high energy, using wit and sarcasm to dismantle his narrative. Her performance was a reminder of why she is seen as such a formidable force in the Conservative Party. She didn't just win the debate, she won the room. By using a single word, supine, she defined the Prime Minister's entire mission. It is the kind of branding that sticks, and Sir Keir will find it hard to shake off the image of a leader lying flat on his back while Beijing calls the shots. The suspension of the China-UK Global Strategic Partnership back in 2018 was a response to serious provocations. Since then, we have seen the poisoning of our cyber networks, the sanctioning of our lawmakers, and the suppression of democracy in Hong Kong. To reset that relationship without any change in behavior from Beijing is, as Badenoch says, short-termist. It prioritizes immediate minor economic gains over the long-term security and integrity of the UK. The geopolitical reality is that China is an adversary, not just a trading partner, and a prime minister who fails to see that is a prime minister who is putting his country at risk. As we look to the future, the Beijing trip will likely be remembered as the moment the Starmer government showed its true colors on the world stage. It is a government that values pragmatism above all else, even if that pragmatism looks a lot like surrender. Badenoch's supine label is more than just a clever insult. It is a warning. It is a warning that if we do not stand up for ourselves now, we will find it even harder to do so in the future. The Labubu doll in the PM's suitcase might be small, but it represents a very large shift in British foreign policy, one that is moving us away from our allies and towards a more accommodating relationship with the world's most powerful autocratic regime. The laughter from the opposition benches when Starmer mentioned closer dialogue on cyber issues was a moment of rare unity in the Commons. It showed that across the political spectrum, there is a deep-seated skepticism about this government's approach to China. Even some on the Labour backbenches were seen looking uncomfortable as the Prime Minister preened about progress. It is a reminder that while Starmer might have a large majority, he does not have a mandate for appeasement. The British public expects their Prime Minister to be clear-eyed about threats, but they also expect him to be strong enough to stand up to them. Kemi Badenoch's one-word destruction of Keir Starmer was a watershed moment in this parliament. It showed that the Conservatives are ready to fight, and that they have a leader who knows how to use the power of language to dismantle a government's narrative. By calling out the supine and short-termist approach, she has set the tone for the debates to come. The Prime Minister might have brought back a doll, but Badenoch has brought back the fight. And as the Beijing reset continues to unfold, we will see whether Starmer's pragmatism pays off, or whether, as his critics fear, he has truly been played by the masters of the game.
Mr. Speaker, all his ideas are the ones that we thought of. He needs to make sure that we deliver for growth now as well as the future. To grow our economy, we must get more people off sickness and welfare and into work. Clauses 8 and 9 of the unemployment bill take us in the opposite direction by increasing entitlements. His government itself estimates that these changes will increase business costs from £600 million to £1 billion a year in sick pay. That will mean higher prices, fewer jobs, less growth. Will he drop these measures from the bill?
The whiskey win, the visa waiver, and the toy stores, it all adds up to a very thin package. When you weigh that against the potential security risks of a mega embassy and the moral cost of abandoning our allies and values, the trip looks like a massive strategic error. Badenoch's high-energy performance has ensured that the Prime Minister cannot simply move on. He will be haunted by that word supine. every time he stands at the dispatch box to talk about foreign policy. It is a word that captures the essence of his leadership: passive, moralistic, but weak, and ultimately ineffective on the world stage. The cyber dialogue with an arsonist, the begging bowl in Beijing, and the Labubu doll in the suitcase. It is a comedy of errors that would be funny if it weren't so serious. Sir Keir Starmer has gone to Beijing and come back with next to nothing, proving once again that in the world of high-stakes diplomacy, being forensic is no substitute for being firm. Kemi Badenoch has destroyed his narrative with one word, and in doing so, she has exposed the hollow heart of his government's foreign policy. The Beijing reset is not a masterstroke of diplomacy. It is a supine surrender. Thank you for watching UK Unfiltered. If you found this insight valuable, do not forget to share the video and join the conversation in the comments. We will see you in the next one. Good day!